Hi there everyone, it's Coach Alexa here. Today I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about getting some balance in your training week. So I see a lot of runners that are maybe pushing themselves a little bit too hard in their training, and I had a few questions actually from a runner I was talking to earlier today about this 80-20 rule of aerobic to anaerobic training. So I thought I'd explain a little bit more about that and how that works into the overall balance of your training. So the 80-20 rule is thinking about doing 80% of your training aerobically and 20% of it anaerobically. Aerobic is where you're able to have a conversation, your breathing is quite steady and rhythmical, you're able to breathe in all the oxygen that you need and get it to your muscles, and your predominant fuel for aerobic training is fat. Anaerobic, your predominant fuel is sugar out of your bloodstream, so there's a limited amount of time you can run for because you'll run out of the sugar stores pretty quickly. You're not able to get in enough oxygen that your muscles need, so again that limits how long you can keep running at an anaerobic level for, and it generally produces more byproducts in your muscles. You can't clear those byproducts away, so it will hurt a little bit more. It's not quite as simple as saying you're either anaerobic or aerobic. In fact, you're very rarely 100% of either of those. You're often a balance of the two. And what happens is that maybe at the start of a 3 or 4 mile really nice conversational pace run, you'll be predominantly aerobic, but you'll be a little bit of anaerobic in there. And then gradually, as your run speed gets faster, the percentage of anaerobic drops, the percentage of aerobic increases. And at the point where they just get to 50-50 and then maybe anaerobic overtakes aerobic, that's called your lactate turning point, which means that lactate, one of those exercise byproducts, is getting to the point where you can't clear it as effectively, and you're going predominantly over to that anaerobic energy system. So why is that important in training? When we're doing endurance sport training, we don't want to be spending more than 20% of our training at or around that threshold. The easy way to work out whether you're on that threshold or not is how much you can talk. So if you can talk in long sentences, short sentences, maybe even a few words at a time, anaerobic. Broadly speaking, if you're only able to talk a word at a time or not talk at all, you're nudging up and stepping over that threshold from predominantly aerobic to predominantly anaerobic. And so we don't want to be doing that too much in our training because we're training for endurance events and not sprint events. If you were doing track-based training, that would be quite a different kettle of fish. So we can have gears though, we can have different levels within that anaerobic versus aerobic, either side of that turning point, that threshold. We can still have lots of different training paces, so being able to have a conversation in a long sentence, a shorter sentence, a few words at a time. You can still train at different paces but remain predominantly aerobic and in that 80%. The other thing I would say is that you want to focus on quality over quantity, and that kind of links in, so not just kind of racking up loads and loads and loads of miles for the sake of miles, and often a lot of runners come to me because they're running everywhere all at one pace. So thinking a little bit about how you structure that training week. You know, could you swap a recovery run for a recovery something else like a swim, cycle or a yoga session to complement your running? What are the purposes behind each of the runs you do? So, you know, there might be 1 or 2 sessions where you've got faster runs a week where you've got faster sections in those runs, and that's great, and there's a purpose for that, for your goal. And other runs might be at a much easier, slower conversational pace to build endurance. So just think about the purpose of the runs and also the purpose of recovery. My general rule of thumb is to have 2 rest days or 2 days where you're doing some very easy cross-training. So it might be that you go to a gentle yoga class on your rest day, that's fine, but going to a spinning class on your rest day, not so much, too much hard work. So that's a little bit of an input about how to get a bit of balance in your training, and I hope that helps.